Hi, it's Mark, the Family Woodworker. This week we unbox and review a new Grizzly benchtop jointer, model 947. For those familiar with my channel, you know that I've avoided the purchase of a jointer for years now, choosing other manual methods to square my cut boards for gluing. A sharp trim blade on my table saw does a nice job cutting me a clean edge for glue up. The cheaper jointers never had the features that I wanted, and the jointers I liked were just too big and expensive. But I found a benchtop jointer design with better features, and I finally decided to pull out my credit card. I opted for the Grizzly model 947, mostly because I had great luck with my Grizzly table saw. However, I found some concerns around the differences between brands. I've highlighted this import tool problem in two other videos where it looks like there are multiple brands selling the exact same design tool with all the same design specifications, except for the paint job and company stickers, that is. All of the controls and even the screw and bolt hole patterns are the same. Check out my scroll saw video for a full explanation about the concept of private labeling. It looks like this may be the same situation for this 8-inch benchtop jointer. So there is likely one actual manufacturer providing this basic tool to a variety of brands for each of them to paint, sticker, and then package for sale. The only variation I could find is in the motor rating, and this may be due to how the brand orders those motors, like you do on a car, to fit their marketing needs. The good news here is that the basic design of this jointer must be a good one for it to be a standard that multiple brands like to sell under their own names. With that knowledge, I felt good about the Grizzly choice with the larger motor, especially after finding that this model could be purchased from Home Depot for less than the Grizzly website price and then delivered to my doorstep for free. The box weighs in around 60 pounds, so it was a little challenging getting it up to the benchtop, but everything seemed to be in good shape. Fighting the normal male urge to dive into the parts and start to assemble it the wrong way, I took the manual outside for a little casual reading. Be sure to read all of the operating and safety instructions. It comes with all of the Allen and Torx wrenches you'll need for assembly, and putting it together was actually pretty easy, though a little messy. The table was covered in oil, a little weird considering that it was cast aluminum, though I guess the oil protected the cutting blades too. The only thing needing assembly was the fence system, which comes in two cast aluminum pieces. The base attaches to the back of the tool with Allen machine screws, and the pivot bracket mechanism for the fence then attaches via a square slider nut and a twist lock handle for quicker fence adjustment. The actual aluminum fence attaches to the bracket assembly via two more square slider nuts that allow you to slide and then center the fence over the cutting head. Notice the oval cutout on the bottom of the fence, and that must be centered over the cutting teeth so that the cutters don't come in contact with the fence. This tool, and others like it of course, have extension bars that slide out on both ends of the jointer to allow for guiding longer wood stock across the top and through the cutting teeth. I checked these bars to verify that they were in line and flat with the table, and all was good from the factory there. With everything assembled, I set the fence completely upright and then checked the angle. It came out to a perfect 90 degrees to the table, which is of course the whole purpose behind this tool. So, that's the very least I expected. On the concerning side, I noticed a little play in the fence as I pushed hard on it. The fence and the bracket assembly seem to flex a little if you unintentionally push a longer, heavier board against it a little too much. That might be a problem because any angle deflection of the fence and you're no longer making cuts at 90 degrees. We'll have to check that out during testing. I also noticed that the outfeed side of the table was not perfectly aligned with the angle of the infeed table when it was positioned at the top of its setting range. The manual says that it all should be aligned from the factory, but hey, sometimes you get stuck with some of these little challenges.
Here we go, pivot! Pivot!
You just have to make it work. Each table can be adjusted with the removal of 4 Torx bolts and a threaded insert that can be raised or lowered with a straight blade screwdriver. This will adjust the level on all 4 corners of each table, but it's difficult to check your adjustment without putting the whole thing back together. The table falls away without the bolts, making tweaks and additional adjustments a pain in the Eventually, I got both tables in alignment, and a straight edge confirms that it's level on both sides of the tool. Now we're finally ready for some testing. Having double-checked that the fence was at 90 degrees, I ran a couple of my longer sawmill boards that had been surface planed through the jointer at one of the smallest settings available. I made multiple passes to ensure that the board had been squared up along the entire edge. I also made sure that the board stayed flat on the table and up against the fence for the entire length, watching and listening that the entire edge had been through the cutting teeth. And then I checked a couple of the long boards to see how they matched up for gluing. They didn't. I then tested some shorter boards like this piece of hard spalted maple, and the process was the same, though most of the board fit on the cast aluminum table. The cut edge was perfect from end to end and actually laid flat on a flat surface. I also tested the jointer as a surface planer, and it did a wonderful job cleaning up the surface of that same hard maple board. Very clean, very smooth. I then tested the miter capability of the fence, setting it at 45 degrees and making multiple passes on this piece of hardwood. It seemed to be pretty easy to hold the stock against the fence and let the cutting teeth do their thing to nibble away at the corner of the board. Again, it was easy because the board was at a manageable length that fit the table. So we're back to the problem on longer, rough sawn boards. If the board's edges are not already straight and square, the smaller table, even with the table extension bars drawn, doesn't seem to handle the longer rough sawn boards, as dips and bulges in the wood grain aren't sitting flat on the table surface. Here's a cheesy little demo to show you what I mean. Let's say we have a long rough cut board like our white ash and it isn't completely straight. Because the board is considerably longer than the joiner table, it will quite naturally follow its own curvature as it passes across the smaller table, even with the extensions. The effect is that the longer board's edge, though jointed at a 90-degree cut, will never be completely straight or flat for a glue-up. You can see the slight curved effect on these jointed tabletop boards. They do not line up tightly. And if I have to set up a straight edge on the board and run it through the table saw first in order to get it flat on its edge, the jointer really isn't helping me save any time. This tells me that the only joiner tool that will really work for longer tabletop boards is a full-sized cabinet jointer with something like a 72-inch milled table. That's money and space in the shop that I simply don't have. Let's touch on the controls. The cutting depth knob on any of these brands is found on the right side of the tool, allowing you to make micro adjustments to your planing or jointing cut depth. There is another knob on the front of the machine that locks in that depth setting, as well as a rotational gauge to help you manage the depth of the cut. I had to adjust this gauge setting as well with the infeed table at its top position. The front safety switch is well positioned, and the removal of the yellow inset key will prevent the accidental power-up of this tool. On the left side of the cabinet, there are two dust port options available. The provided insert drops the hole size down to a standard 2.5-inch shop vac hose, or it will also accept a larger 4-inch dust collector hose as well. This tool also comes with two rubber padded flat push pads, which actually work pretty great for holding material up against the fence or down on the table. A couple of other tidbits worth noting on this tool. Maintenance appears to be pretty easy, provided you keep your cutting teeth clean and you use an adequate vacuum system to pull the shavings out of the tool. And you will create a ton of shavings. Unlike the longer bits that are cut by these knives on my tabletop planer, the spiral teeth take smaller nibbles from the wood, making for smaller shavings, which are less likely to get stuck in the suction hose. Should you ever need to change a drive belt, it's pretty easy to access on the back of the cabinet. And finally, I highly recommend that you anchor this tool down to a countertop or a cabinet, as you need the stability when working with longer, heavier wood. I've repurposed this old rolling cabinet used to store my vac hoses. I removed the wheels, and now it sits nice and firm on the shop floor with lag bolts holding the tool to the top of the cabinet. So let's talk about the good stuff. This overall design is relatively well proven because it's sold by multiple brands. It's pretty affordable compared to any full-size cabinet jointer, and it's portable to some degree, moving it from a workbench to a garage if you need to, or even to a job site. I actually like the miter feature. It makes pretty accurate bevel cuts at 45 degrees, and I opted for that larger motor from Grizzly, which provides good power on dense hardwoods. Not so great? I think there's quite a bit of fuzzy logic here about the differences between brands. In fact, if you look at the detailed specs, there aren't any differences between these brands. I found that the prices vary, so that makes you responsible for being a good consumer when you make your purchase. I found it was difficult to handle my longer rough cut stock on this smaller table, and it couldn't really manage jointing on that rough sawn lumber. My boards really needed to be cut on the table saw with a straight edge first, which kind of helps eliminate the need for the jointer. So my overall summary, I broke this down into two reviews. I think for hobby work for smaller tabletops, cutting boards, or cleaning up the edges on finished home center lumber, this gets 4 out of 5 thumbs. It's a pretty good tool. I'm still glad I bought it, but on the other side of my argument, using longer wood stock or unfinished sawmill lumber is really a problem for this particular jointer. And I prefer to buy this unfinished lumber because it's just far cheaper than getting it from Lonard's Depot. Lonard's Depot. We probably have it, but it's going to cost you. For larger projects, this thing only rates 3 out of 5 thumbs. Hey everybody, thanks for watching our little channel. We really appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up and maybe subscribe as well. Take care.